there are people who carry all the wrong decisions that they've made in their backpack, full of behaviors that are not healthy. To be able to live this minute right now without the burden of carrying around all the mistakes you've made. We all have a hall of shame. Don't carry it with you. Let it go, because that drags you down. It will drown you.
You're listening to Find the Good News, episode 116, The Burdensome Backpack, a road trip episode featuring Mickey Shannon of Resource Management Services. Find the Good News is produced by Parker Brand Creative Services, a branding agency that thinks sideways, pushes forward, and gets your brand up. See what else we do at parkerbrandup.com. After a much-needed summer break, Find the Good News is back with a special road trip episode. It had been quite a while since my last road trip recording, and while I didn't have to travel far to meet my guest, it was still refreshing to be out of doors. In this episode, I got to visit with Mickey Shannon under the great blue sky at Prien Lake Park in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Mickey and I share a common friendship with my high school speech teacher and dear friend Aleta Barnes, who, if you will recall from episode 33, has been more of a mentor than either of us realized at the time. I trust Aleta, so when she suggested that Mickey and I make a connection, I did so without hesitation. This pre-existing bond is a direct link in the good news chain that led to my sitting across from Mickey on such a mild, breezy day, months before the summer slog and bake weather moved into Southwest Louisiana. Mickey is the CEO and president of Resource Management Services, a business that has been providing behavioral health services in Southwest Louisiana for over 25 years. Like most of us, Mickey is much more than her official title, although after sitting with her, it was very easy to see why she was called to service in her particular field. Honestly, this wasn't the first time I'd sat down to visit with Mickey under the clear blue sky. Not too long ago, she invited me to the peaceful bayou that borders her property to dig iris flowers to transplant around my small lotus pool. On that day, we sat on the grass of her front lawn and had an incredibly friendly, peaceful visit as well. Mickey is an artist, and if you seek out her works, you'll find a comforting blend of local creatures and fauna, as well as a healthy dose of spiritual vision. It is clear to me that Mickey wants to improve the quality of the lives she comes in contact with, whether it be those in her close circles or in the larger rings surrounding her community. Whatever you want to call this method of moving through life that Mickey Shannon has adopted is probably fine with her. She doesn't seem to concern herself much with labels. Mickey is more intent on living as well as she can and being a blessing to others using her gifts and resources. I'd like to believe that there are more people in this world like Mickey, especially in my community. She's a reminder to me that even if I don't see them, they are out there. That gives me a strong dose of comfort and resolve to keep taking these little trips to meet with people just like her. That gives me a strong dose of comfort and resolve to keep taking these little trips to meet with people just like her and then sharing those conversations with you. Now, it's time to get out of doors, get out of your head, and take a little drive with me. Turn the wheel towards the good heart I found in Mickey Shannon, then press play on a little good news.
Wake up, it's morning. You're dreaming up a story. I can hear the way it's going, 'cause you're laughing in your sleep on the path to your deliverance, and a holy roll of light pouring through your window.
Old news, bad news, fake news. Sometimes you want to hit the road and get away from it all. With Find the Good News road trips, I get behind the wheel and seek out good people doing good works. I travel the highways, byways, and back roads to seek out artists, educators, civic and spiritual leaders, musicians, business owners, students, volunteers, and everyday citizens who are using their creativity, resources, and talents to bring hope and happiness to the places and spaces that hold meaning for them. In each episode, I journey into the hearts and minds of my extraordinary guests. We have down-to-earth conversations about relatable things going on in their lives and in their communities. I uncover the critical life experiences that shaped them, the environments that nurtured them, and the fundamental beliefs that have anchored them to a path of goodness. There's a lot of news on the open road. My name is Orrin Parker, and you're invited to take this road trip with me to find the good.
I love you just as well.
What an opportunity today turned out to be.
You couldn't
Yes.
ask for better Southwest Louisiana weather. Maybe a few degrees cooler, I might, if I had to wish.
It's good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's perfect, really.
Yeah.
And you said that this place does not necessarily connect with me, but you know, before this was Prien Lake Park, it was owned by some folks that I've known all my life.
Oh, really?
And they had trailers here. It was a trailer park, and they sold it.
I didn't know that.
And we used to come here because it was such a nice, big, gracious space and have Easter morning sunrise services.
Really?
Yes.
Out here?
Right here.
Wow.
Right.
That's interesting.
So, you
well,
know,
I was connected to this place in a way, not really before it was a park, but many years ago, in one of my advertising incarnations, I worked at another company, and we did the branding here. So I designed the logo and all of the signage that takes you around the park.
Yeah.
And they were just planting the trees, and like all these paths were staked out. And so when we first came out here, they were, when we were walking through, it was more like a blueprint. It's like, yeah, this is going to be a little amphitheater, and there's going to be a fountain here. So early stages, and I was trying to come up with a logo, not knowing what it was going to be like.
And you did come up with the logo?
Yeah. The Prien Lake Park logo is the logo I designed. Yeah, the one that has the little schooner on it with the sails.
Your DNA is
all the
embedded.
banners and the little signs. Yeah, that's all. It's kind of cool now too, because these trees, many of them were just little strapped down saplings, and I was thinking that this morning driving in. I was like, God, they're big now.
Yeah.
So what was that like? That would have been like 2005 or 6?
I think,
Or maybe
somewhere
more
around
like
there.
2008 or 2009 when they really started breaking ground and doing the work, wasn't it?
I don't really remember the timeline.
Yeah.
I just remember being so surprised that they had sold the property.
Oh, okay.
And then so much happened so quickly, it seems to me. And I was so excited that this is now public land.
Yeah.
Because when you have a place that is this pristine and open space for people to come and bring their animals and their kids, it's such a gift.
It is.
And it's so gracious of the city or the parish or whoever paid for this, the taxpayers, to have a place like this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I like it. They get the kayak launch, which is great. I don't have a kayak, I'm a canoeer, but it's the same situation. I mean, being able to launch into the lake. Before this, we used to have to kind of use whatever boat launch or find a little spot. And it's nice now there's more awareness or it's just more interest in it in our community, I guess. And I like that. Now, I don't live close to here, but it's not hard for us to get here, you know. I think that parks like this are super important. I mean, they become sacred. I know I have a park that I go to that's got that feeling, you know. They're a little it's a little oasis from the chaos sometimes.
Right. A place to breathe and hear natural sounds.
Yeah. Well, this waterway kind of connects back to your place
It
too,
does.
right? I mean,
Yes.
you can take that.
It sure does.
Yeah.
Right down the street and round my back.
I wanted to tell you, all the irises that you gave me from your property, they're all doing really well.
Great.
At first, they were shocked. You know, that's how they do. The leaves all kind of wilted over, and then all the new stuff started coming through. Now, they're not blooming yet. They're kind of going through that.
Yeah, but when they do,
yeah.
they'll be gorgeous. It's interesting because of the iris that I gave you, it seems to me that they have just multiplied exponentially, and they're gorgeous.
Yeah.
The purple is so regal.
I'm looking forward to it. I planted them around. I have this little lotus pool, and it's kind of a wild space around it. I did that on purpose. And then around that, I have stones, and there was nothing around the stones. And so what I've done is I took the irises and I put them around it. So in the future, my idea would be that eventually they'll just keep spreading
Oh, and they
around
will.
there.
You'll be shocked at how quickly they spread.
Yeah.
And I'll be curious to hear from you if they remain yellow or purple or white,
Yeah.
if they change colors, because it's strange to me how you think
we got-
you're planting one and it comes up a different color. And I don't know if it has something to do with the soil.
I don't know. That happened to me with some canna lilies that I had got from the woods. I went on a walk one day and I found a whole mess of them out there, and I spread them around my property, and they're quadrupled. I mean, they're everywhere, but they were all orange. But then right after the hurricane, I noticed a yellow one coming out, and it had like a spattering of red, and I thought, what an odd thing. And just in the midst of all these other ones, that there's this one, you know,
so
that just
different.
shot up. Yeah.
Isn't
Didn't
that
make
wonderful?
any sense. I know, I
it's
love
so
it.
exciting.
Yeah.
Mother Nature really has her own way of doing things. It seems like after the hurricanes and, you know, the freeze, everything that I thought was dead is alive.
Yeah.
And with such just unbelievable presence and powerful color, more than I think I've ever seen. And I don't know if we have some kind of pixie dust because we've been through such a horrible year that we see things differently.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, you have to look for it. I mean, it's...
Right.
And everybody's different. I mean, look, that's the thing. I know some people have been kind of using the analogy of we're all in the same storm, but everybody's riding it in a different ship, you know? And I get that. Some people are more insulated from suffering and tragedies than others. And depending on what you went through this last year and what your vessel was to ride it out, you're going to look at that stuff differently, you know? Some people are having smooth rides with insurance, some people aren't. Some people lost their homes, their next door neighbor didn't.
Exactly.
It's just so random.
It is. It is random. And people like myself, we had some damage, but I have survivor's guilt.
Oh, I understand that.
You know, because so many people that we love have lost everything.
Right.
I mean, have had to relocate, have had to just sell what they had, which was torn up and abused, and move to another state. And we've lost them from our lives. And now we're hearing, you know, it'll be hurricane season again in 2 weeks. They've moved the date up.
Yeah, it's a longer season.
I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. I want to live now, knowing that we have the resilience that we need as a people, which it seems to me that we do, because even the worst case scenarios, people have had unbelievable attitudes about, it's just stuff, I can sink my roots deep and draw the strength to pick up the pieces and keep going one day at a time.
Yeah.
I've been amazed at the stories.
Yeah, I have too. I have to watch myself and be careful with that thinking too, because I do want to, I say this a lot on the show, I want to find the good, but I don't always.
Sure.
And, you know, as soon as I hear a story like that or a version of that, right around the corner, it seems there's another, it's somebody that just is in a completely different scenario where it's like they've been punched too many times and you're going, they've had enough. And you can tell they've had enough because they're checking themselves into the hospital or they're, I mean, unfortunately attempting suicide. You know, and I have had encounters with that where I'm like, man, some people are able to climb the rope and some people get to the end of the rope and there's nothing and nobody there to help them tie a knot.
Absolutely. And it you know, it makes a thinking person ask the question, what creates resiliency in people?
Yeah, no, I know.
Where does that come from?
I
How
that
come
too.
people who've lost everything can pick up and keep on going, and others who have more than the average Joe can be so devastated because they've lost their stuff?
I know. I think about this a lot. I think my wife and I were kind of talking about this a little bit today, actually, on another issue, but it got me thinking, which is something I think about a lot, is how important it is to have something to live for that's not stuff.
Absolutely.
Whatever it may be, whether if you have children, so make it about the children, but even that is something, they are something that could be taken from you or lost too. So it's getting into that root of what is it, like you said, what is like that true base platform that's resilience, that builds someone's ability to put their feet on the ground in the morning and keep going. And I don't know what that is.
Well, I think, you know, I'm 70. How old are you?
I'm 46.
Okay, so a big difference in age.
Yeah.
But I would say that it is the woundings that we learn from. We either learn through the wounding to pick up the pieces, it sounds so trite, one day at a time, but truthfully, honestly, that's all there is. One breath at a time. I remember after Hurricane Rita, my husband and I were just so devastated, and we changed from one day at a time to one breath at a time. Just breathe in, breathe out.
Yeah.
And as a young woman, I experienced some serious losses. I lost my first baby. It was stillborn.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And, that was over 40 years ago. But I can get in touch with that loss in the blink of an eye.
It's interesting. You can go to it.
Mm-hmm. Until that happened to me, I thought I was in control of my world. I thought that I could just make good choices and schedule things and have an agenda, and I could make things happen in my life, and I was in control. So what I knew prior to the loss of that baby was completely irrational. It was, I can take care of me. I can't take care of me.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
That loss taught me that I'm completely unable to control my world. Any thought that I can control my world is just a delusion. So it took a long time to pick up those pieces. But I thank God I grew up in a Christian home where my family was very serious about going to church every Sunday. We went to church and Sunday school. And I knew, I had been taught the principles of faith, that God loves you, God doesn't want bad things to happen to you. Those kinds of things that make the ground that you're planted in very rich. And so one day at a time, I was able to realize God still loves me. This is not about anything I've done wrong. I can learn from this. I can pick up these pieces. And one day at a time, I was able to begin to put my life back together.
You're getting into something so interesting. I think about this a lot. And I don't know if it's a perspective that is comforting to people or maybe more terrifying, and I've heard both. Mm-hmm. But that's something that's always almost made me uncomfortable, is when I hear somebody tell me that, well, that happened for a reason, right? Mm-hmm. Or that was in God's plan. And it's something, a tragedy. Mm-hmm. You've lost a child, or your house burns down, or someone dies of cancer.
Your husband leaves you.
Yeah. Keep drawing rings. And when I've always had this, and even as a young person, I was like, well, every time I draw a ring around my life, a bigger ring, and that ring intersects with the world at large, I find suffering in every category of that ring. I find my human and brothers and sisters living in chemical wastelands on the other side of the planet. I find poverty and famine and disease and war in places that I don't live. Are those human, so does that mean in a planned world, a planned out situation, does that mean that there's a higher power that's looking down and saying, well, these get to suffer, but you don't? Suffering doesn't come to you, it comes to them. You're blessed, they're not. And so I left that. I just left that alone, and I thought, it didn't make me an atheist or anything like that, but it just gave me more comfort to believe that there isn't a plan like that. Not that there's not a plan, but not a plan like that. Not in that very human, particular perspective. Because it didn't make sense to me how one person could have a child in the hospital and they could fall on their knees and weep to the heavens, and their child could die. And then the person in the room next door to them could fall on their knees and weep to the heavens, and their child doesn't. But their love is the same. I don't know, it's a rant, but I don't know if that makes any sense what I'm getting at.
That's the quality of questions that people who have a burden of conscience ask themselves and struggle with and seek to find answers to, because those kinds of questions, well, they've haunted me all my life, because I've felt like, is this something I'm supposed to do something about? Is this something that's going to happen to me?
Yeah, meaning. You want meaning, right?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Looking for meaning.
Yeah.
Well, to give you my perspective, and I'm not a theologian. I don't
Me
know
either.
a whole lot about anything, to tell you the truth. I know a little bit about a lot of things, but I don't know a whole lot about anything. I believe things happen because of laws of the universe, gravity. Things happen because life is not perfect. And it's hard to express this, but I don't think God intends evil or disaster or bad things to happen to anybody. I really do not believe that. I believe God loves us and God is with us through anything that happens. At the same time, there are laws in the universe. If you drop an apple, it's going to fall to the ground. And there are universal things that we know. For instance, if a woman chooses to drink after work and she gets into a car accident and kills someone, that's not God. That was human choice. And choice is the pivot point for everything that happens with us. Whether you choose to make healthy choices or choose to be selfish, whether you choose to value money more than you value our ecology, our world, every dynamic of our lives is about choice. And it's so easy to just forget that.
It is,
But
yeah.
if you think of the choices that we have every day, the thousands of choices, it's unbelievable how much we influence each other, for good or for bad. But I feel that so strongly because I believe that God lives within each and every one of us. And those people who are awake feel that. They know it. They live it. They make choices based on a desire to do the right thing, to please God, and to be an example to people of the good. And the ways that we can influence each other for the good are just unbelievable. Just being an encourager, just going to the grocery store and smiling at someone who may not have had a smile. A friend of mine told me about being in the grocery store, and she's very concerned about COVID and very infection conscious.
Yeah.
But a little lady that worked in the grocery store was taking her break and sat down at the table with her, and they just started a real simple little conversation. And after the conversation was over, the little lady that worked in the store came back to my friend and said, "Connie, I want you to have this pen." It was a Crayola pen, a big fat Crayola pen. She said, "I appreciate you talking to me so much." And you go through something like that, you don't think anything of it. But that very little story is an example of the influence that we have and how we affect each other so powerfully, for good or for bad.
Yeah.
It changed her life that day.
Yeah, everything you're talking about, I'm down with it. I mean, it's like that's something that I truly believe in because it can be proved too. Not just because it can be proved, but you can see it in play in the world as interbeing. Exactly what you're talking about. That everything is playing off of everything else. And my son and I talk about this constantly because after we had the conversation, he's so young. He was like, "I never really thought about it, Dad, but I call it the wind, but I don't see it. And the only way it's proved is by what it moves, and the sensation on my skin. But beyond that, I can't see it with my eyes. I only see its effects." And that's true. I mean, it's exactly what you're describing. We don't know what we're affecting always. And sometimes we're walking through the world unconsciously affecting so much. I mean, every day. I mean, to stay in a state of awareness and mindfulness it's difficult. There's so many distractions that take us out. As you and I talked about when we first got here, how it would be nice if we could just make choices like today. we've been blessed with a clear blue sky, good temperature, a breezy day, an opportunity to do something mentally healthy that would be healthy for us. That's what all this is. It's to help. It helps us. But we've built a world through choices that does not allow that flexibility, and it's a tragedy, really.
As a business owner, I've owned a business for almost 30 years with 3 locations, and I see employees who are very, very faithful to their business, to taking care of the mentally ill persons that they have responsibility for. And then at the end of the day, regardless of how their day has been, they go home and take care of their families. They're healthy, healthy people. But then there are also those persons who are so driven, they can't stop what they're doing. They work so hard. It's all about productivity. It's all about how much money you make. It's all about driving yourself. And I would say to those, particularly women who do what I call do too much, they can't stop doing, there's some pain that is hidden by being busy.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
And so as long as you're busy and you're doing important things, and I mean, what's more important than working with mentally ill people, or working at the church or volunteering for Habitat for Humanity to the extent that you don't take care of your family.
Yeah.
What a worthy cause.
Right.
But I think it was Mother Teresa that said, if you want to change the world, start with your family.
Yeah, she said something like that.
Yeah.
She said you can find, I read something like that she said, you can find Calcutta in your backyard.
Absolutely.
Your Calcutta might be right closer than you think. I mean, I was guilty of that, honestly, in my youth especially. And that's something that has haunted me even as a older person now. I mean, when I was young, I had these ideas about what it meant, what my life-changing awakening, and I say it with jest because how funny to even say those words now. It's so silly in a way because it's many times we wake up, throughout our lives. But it was a one moment where something happened that made a huge shift for me, a huge pivot.
Yeah.
And I thought that pivot meant different things than it actually ended up meaning because I ultimately didn't align some of my big navigational choices with that pivot. I aligned a lot of small things with it, but none of the big choices. Career, marriage, children, where I live, all these things, none of those things were aligned with that pivot. But those things were the rudder, right? Those were steering me into a particularly big stream. And I look back and I think it's funny now because I'm okay with that. I'm like, because you can easily say, oh, I made an error here. My oldest son asks me questions like that all the time. He's like, do you ever wish that you had done this? And I said, well, then you're getting into some like a time travel movie, right? You can go, oh, well, if I went back and done this, then I could have missed this particular stop and then this stop and then this stop. All of those things grind on you and shape you and make you into something particular now.
If you're healthy.
Yeah, if you're healthy, that's right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's true to say that.
Because there are people, I really appreciate what you're saying. There are people who carry all the wrong decisions that they've made in their backpack.
Oh, yeah.
It's invisible, but it's there.
That's
and they're
true.
critical and they're full of behaviors that are not healthy. And those are people who need therapy.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Work
to help work through those things
absolutely,
or work with those things.
To be able to live this minute right now without the burden of carrying around all the mistakes you've made. We all have a history. We all have a hall of shame.
Yeah.
Don't carry it with you. Let it go. And if you can't, get help.
Yeah.
I mean, as a mental health professional, I have to say that because that drags you down. It will drown you.
Longtime Find the Good News listeners know that we often meander into topics on spirit, mysticism, religion, and wisdom traditions. If you are interested in these topics, I encourage you to seek out my new podcast, The Dawn Deacon with Brother Orrin. On the Dawn Deacon podcast, I consider my small place in the whole of creation, asking the old questions that have perplexed human beings for ages. Why are we here? Is there a reason for our existence? How do we balm our sufferings, enlighten our minds, and awaken our hearts? Are there powers, energies, and realities just beyond our ability to comprehend them? On the Dawn Deacon podcast, I share the teachings, practices, and perspectives I have gathered as I've made my varied, sacred, ordinary way. I hope you'll join me at the Dawn Deacon podcast so that we can traverse this landscape together. Just search The Dawn Deacon with Brother Orrin in your favorite podcast app or search engine, then subscribe. So let's talk about that.
Okay.
I know you brought up your businesses, and we're talking about mental health. So where does that start for you? Like, if you don't mind, just talk about your businesses and how you've helped people.
Okay. I am one of 3 owners of Resource Management Services. We're a mental health rehabilitation company. We have locations in Lafayette, Lake Charles, and Jennings, and we work with people to help them find function in their lives. There's a huge scale of really healthy people, really unhealthy people, and we serve everybody in between. But our goal is to help people be independent, to live in their natural environment, to be as functional as they can possibly be. If they need help with medication management, or say children who are enrolled in school and need help with their behaviors, we work on all those kinds of things. And those services are offered through a program that Medicaid pays for.
Oh, okay.
Because
that's good to know.
Yeah, these are the only people that we can care for or work with. I hate to say care for, because we're not caring for them.
No, I understand.
We're partnering with them to help them make healthy choices.
Yeah.
Those persons are persons who are really at risk of either out-of-home placement, like kids who are looking at being taken from home. I just keep hitting the microphone.
It's microphone awareness. It's hard.
I'm trying to wake you up. Or adults who are so sick, that they may need hospitalization, but we try to keep them from getting to that next step. We go to the homes, kind of like home health in a sense, under the Medicaid services. Now, we also offer regular counseling services.
Okay.
So the Medicaid services are a whole different ball game that offer a much more intensive kind of service that you couldn't get with private insurance.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say. There's things that having people in your life who are going through things like this, you do sort of learn some of that. And I've said that many times, as someone with private insurance, I couldn't get access to those same things.
Right.
At least to the, I guess, as many resources as what I see.
Right.
I'm like sometimes astounded. I'm like, wow, there's so much more. Yeah, that gets into an insurance issue, like a whole nother topic. But it's interesting. I'm actually surprised. Yeah. Sometimes.
So that's what we do. And if it's a child, we take children as young as 6. We don't take them younger than that. But our folks will go to the school system if the school system will allow it, create a family plan if needed, so that the family and the teacher and all the people that are in that child's family group, which we would include the teacher, are all speaking the same language. We're all trying to reinforce the same good behaviors and decrease the behaviors that are not socially acceptable, those kinds of things. So it's very intensive and very intimate.
It makes sense, and I've used this word on the show quite a bit recently because this keeps coming up, and it sounds holistic. I mean, you have to bring in, as you said, because what I've observed is that let's just say we look at the child, and then the child has problems, and you see it go on for many, many years, but the home is never addressed.
Right.
or maybe there's something happening at school that's never addressed, or especially nowadays, there's even more non-nuclear families.
Mm-hmm.
It could be mini homes. You may have one situation at one home and a whole different dynamic at another. I went through that after my divorce with my children.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was two different. We weren't aligned in our thinking, you know, and so my children were going through different rules at different homes and different ways of thinking and different parenting styles, and I saw that affect my kids. I mean, I've seen it even today. I see that play out. I go, it changed them, unfortunately, in bad ways. It left some type of trauma.
It gave you the ability to see what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
That pulling both sets of families together, which doesn't happen very often.
Oh, no. I mean, I can see that because even during, you have to have, this kind of gets into something related to something I went through when I went through divorce. And I have seen people after I went through my divorce that I really advocate for this, but I did not see it work well. It was mediation.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have two people willing to bend when you go to mediation.
Yes.
If you're both rigid in mediation, it's futile.
Right.
It was a futile experience for me because I saw inflexibility and I was like, man, that when looking back, and this is going back to what's in your backpack, as you said, I look at that and go, yeah, that started in mediation with inflexibility, just the root of it. But the root of that was obviously the cause. It was the roots of the divorce as well, which then transfers into inflexibility after the divorce takes place and scheduling and things like that. So yeah, it's interesting how it just rolls downhill and gets into other people's lives.
It really goes all the way back to when a man, let's say traditional family, a man marries a woman, she's marrying her family, all the traditions of her family, the parenting skills of her family, the health or unhealthiness of her family.
Right.
And all of that is ingrained in her, and a lot of it in her backpack, and you're bringing all of your stuff.
Right.
And so two people are getting married who know very little about each other other than the fact that they really turn each other on. And that's hardly the healthy base for a marriage.
Right.
However, that's what happens.
A lot.
So unless people are really willing to really learn how to communicate and negotiate and give in and keep their eyes focused on the needs of the kids, it's so hard.
Right.
You know, speaking as a mother, I had 3 kids. I was professional. I did a lot of outside service. I was the good example of the do too much mother until I finally realized, you know, it's my kids that are getting the brunt in. And so very early, I made a decision that I was not going to do anything after hours. That no public speaking, no going to meetings, I just dropped everything.
Yeah.
And my friends were furious with me. You know, I got off all the boards and all that. But that enabled us as a family to stabilize the busyness.
Yeah.
And just as an example, we started having Monday night family night, which meant it didn't matter if you had basketball practice or you had scouts or you had whatever. After that was over, you came home for family supper. And we actually did that until just recently. And my kids are grown. But I do think that sitting in front of each other, having a meal, talking about your day, which most of the time was like, well, how was your day? It was all right. You know?
No, I get that. Yeah.
But there was predictability in the family. There was, you could trust. And I think trust is like the biggest word you can have in a family. I mean, there's love, but, you know, love is a bunch of other stuff. Knowing that I can go home and my mom's going to have dinner on the table and she's going to give me lunch money. See, I'm all about the food. I'm going to have a time where I have to do my homework. There's these expectations. All these things are going to be in place. I can trust that.
Yeah,
That's
right.
huge.
Stability.
Right.
Some things that you can count on.
Huge.
It is, especially for young people.
Right.
Yeah.
And it means sacrifice. It means the adults have to sacrifice a lot of what they really want to do because they're in the, the peak of their career, or if they just do 10% more, they're going to beat out somebody else for this promotion.
I totally get this. I mean, it's part of why I'm self-employed. I mean, when we got into that, well, I'll say it like this, because I have competitors who are successful that way. And I look at what it took to get there. I mean, I've seen the lives that they've lived, and they have a lot of nicer things than we have, and they have nicer homes and nicer cars. And so by the standards that we measure success, they are more successful. But the reality is that I wasn't looking for that. I mean, it would be nice to have that kind of stability or insulation. I'd say that's probably the word to use, but I've traded that for flexibility. I mean, when my kids need me, I can be there. I've been able to spend the time with them to show them that they are important. And I know that's a luxury that not everybody gets.
Absolutely.
I mean, Michelle and I were just talking about that today. I said, you realize that that's our true blessing that we get out of doing this. It's not gains.
Right. Right. And I do feel, again, I'm one of those persons that I feel guilty about things that I didn't do, but I just feel the guilt. So I have to work myself out of that. But I know that I had opportunity to be at home, where I've had friends that 2 or 3 jobs, they had no choice.
Right.
And I understand that. I respect that. And, you hope with families like that the time that those moms or dads get to spend with their kids, that there is some quality conversation.
You know what's interesting about this? And this is where I have to be really honest, because I'm scared a listener would hear us talk about this and go, well, maybe if I just do that, it's going to work out great. I have to temper that with the truth. And the truth is, even though we made those sacrifices, I still had trouble with with children too.
Absolutely.
That just you go,
yes.
God, I did everything. I made all these sacrifices, and it actually just some of those sacrifices I might as well just lit them on fire because
it didn't work.
It didn't work at all. It's actually a deficit in some situations, certain scenarios, and so that's the joke. I mean, I'm smiling right now because I go, that's life. Everything's fine and everything burns down.
And it goes all the way back in a spiral to choice, because kids have choices.
They do. They become autonomous at some point.
And you hope for that. But I remember my son, my middle child, saying to me, Mama, you just want to control my life. And, he was probably in like 6th grade. And I said, son, that is the last thing I want. I don't want to control your life. I want you to be independent and be able to make healthy decisions on a dime.
Yeah.
And not depend on me at all, because one day I want you to be grown and married and have your own family. I don't want to control, but I want you to know how to stop and make a choice.
Yeah. No, that's true. I get that. That's something that I don't know that I was given. I wasn't really shown that. There's a lot of choices I made with just, I guess, autonomy. It was like, hey, I don't have any kind of rudder. There was no sense of anybody to guide me in those situations. So I just made choices. You just do the best you can with the information you've given. So it's kind of the harder way to learn sometimes.
It definitely is.
So when you're lucky if you have a parent or a mentor or somebody who just gives you a little wing that they wrap around you, not to protect you, but to say, hey, let me show you. I've said this many times, and it's sort of related, but whenever I first met my wife, my wife Michelle, and there were things that needed to be done around the house, there were things I was going, gosh, I know my dad knew how to do these things. So whenever I first moved in and there were things to be done, I was like, okay, I don't know how to do this. I know my dad knows how to do these things, but it was never shown to me. He never taught me, so I had to kind of figure it out. And so I went to YouTube a lot when I was in my 30s, okay? And I would learn how to do things. And I remember thinking one time how it's there's probably a lot more people out there like me that weren't shown how to do certain things, you know. And I wondered, like, I would imagine, like, what would it have been like to have had that kind of relationship, you know, where your parents gonna say, hey, are you interested in this? Let me show you. So I do that intentionally with my youngest boy, especially. Like, he's very receptive, and so I've been buying him his own tools. Like, every week we go get a tool, and I'll say, well, let's make a project for us to do together, and I'll show him how to do it. And what I've seen is, by doing that, each successive project, he uses his tool differently. You know, he uses it with more confidence, and then he wants to do more projects. And I thought, man, this is what this looks like. And it's new to me because I didn't.
What a gift.
But it's such an interesting thing, and it seems so simple. I'm sure there's somebody listening to this going, yeah, that's how it's supposed to be.
No, I'm sure there probably is. But in the same world, there are people that are saying, oh, dads teach that. There are dads that...
I imagine that there probably was a time, though, where mothers and fathers probably did more of that because it was a necessity to do it. I mean, there was no... Right. I was thinking about this I'm about to get off on a way big... take a big tributary here, but I was even thinking about this with, like, gardening and fishing and just even things that you do around your home, or just basic things that we do in this society. And I was like, you know, there was probably a time before each generation you're thinking, well, there's no safety net, right? There's no safety net. There's nobody going to pull me out of this if I fail. There's no, guardian after the fact. There's no all-seeing eye looking out, waiting to catch you if you make a mistake. If you run out of food, there's, now we can run to the grocery store and there's something in plastic in the freezer. Well, there's always something frozen I can get, but there was a time before that. And when I start to kind of think about it that way, I'm like, yeah, it was a necessity to teach each other useful skills. It made sense because it's like, well, if you're going to survive in this world, then you need to know how to do X, Y, Z. Because you can't, there wasn't a business for every potential option out there. I mean, now you can hire somebody to do anything.
If you have money.
If you have money. But even still, I mean, there had to be a time before that, before you could call somebody to cut your grass, or call somebody to make the most minuscule repair, or somebody to bring you a hamburger, waiter and things like that. And I just think maybe that might be what's going on too, is that we're just slowly getting more and more comfortable with there being safety nets everywhere.
Well, you're calling it a safety net, and I'm hearing convenience.
Yeah, well, convenience, yeah. Things are more convenient, right. But what happens when they're not there,
right,
I guess,
right.
And that's where I see challenges in some young people.
And I think what I'm seeing as you're saying this is, we used to, back 100 years ago, there was the nuclear family who lived either with or next door to the grandparents. And when mom and dad were not able to do those things you're talking about, grandparents were there to teach.
Right.
There was a safety net. There, you did without. You learned how to do it. You were expected to help, which is all a part of creating a healthy family.
Yeah, it's an organism.
It's back to trust and the organicness of making everybody's needs met.
And that's community.
Right.
That's what it should be.
That's right. And so you learned these things because you didn't have a choice about it. If you didn't know how to cut the rice, there wouldn't be any rice.
Right.
If you didn't know how to darn your socks, you didn't have any socks.
I was telling this to my son, and it was a simple thing, but he just got his first car. And so, I was making a list of all the things that he needs to keep in his car. And I was making that list the other night, but as I was making the list, I was realizing I'm making this list for myself. Because these are the things that I would keep, that I know that I would keep because I know how to do them. But I can give him a can of Fix-A-Flat and a tire patch kit and then he could get a flat tire and not know what to do with any of those things. So that list is, unless I show him.
Yeah.
And so I told him the other day, I said, I'm going to, now that you got the car, this weekend, we're going to learn how to do the tire. The tire's not flat. And he was like, well, don't we have some kind of roadside repair on the app on our insurance? And I was like, we do, but I still think you need to know how to do this. And I was so interesting because I was like, God, but when I was his age, that wasn't, and I'm not blaming him. It's just the convenience, as you said. I thought that was not a thing.
Well, number one, we didn't have an app. We wouldn't have known what an app was. We didn't have a cell phone. We didn't have Google.
There was none of that stuff.
But what you're sharing with him is not just technique, it's wisdom. It's that part of you that loves him, that wraps around him and says, yeah, you can get all that from a computer or from your cell phone, but I want you to know from my history what I know is important, because I want you to have self-sufficiency.
Yes.
And to be able to take care of yourself and to be able to trust yourself. Not have to call somebody else, but to trust yourself that you can take care of yourself.
It's fear. As I'm listening to you say that, it's all I keep hearing in my head is, I don't want him to be afraid.
Right.
Because that to me was something that I remember being, even as an adult, when I was going, oh my gosh, this problem has arisen, and I don't even immediately don't know the answer. I have to figure this out. Which you learn, and the fear goes away once you try something. And as a parent, I feel like that's an important job for anyone, for any parent, is to go, hey, how can you, especially in this world we're living in, how can you keep your kids from living in anxiety and fear?
You just spoke some really eloquent words about fatherhood. Let me speak some about motherhood and fear. My middle son lives in Austin. He has a degree. He has a master's in information systems technology systems, information science technology system. His wife has the same degree. They graduated from LSU. They're nerds, just pure techie computer nerds. We can hardly have a conversation with them because we don't speak the same language. They had a baby. She had never held a baby until just a few years before, had no siblings that were younger, had no cousins, never experienced a baby before. My son had experienced it, but he was never interested in that. He was at the computer. They live in Austin. Her family doesn't live there. None of our family lives there. Fear is, oh my God, these people are going to raise a baby. They don't know anything about it. They're going to have to Google how to breastfeed. All those fears of a mother. I was worried sick about their baby. And yet I couldn't go over there and be with them.
Right.
And the good news is they are like many of the 35-ish to 45-ish age. They're wise, and they ask for help. They're not afraid to ask for help. They're information people. So they immediately became members of groups that did have young babies who could help them and assist them and be a support system for them. I can't tell you how proud I am that they did that, because I was filled with fear.
Interesting.
About how that baby was going to be okay. And he's 18, 20 months, something like that. He goes to a preschool that teaches 3 different languages. They have yoga, they raise chickens, and it's just the most remarkable thing. And I think the point is, you are doing something wonderful, spending that quality time and teaching your son. And I remember my dad doing the same thing, and I could remember thinking, oh, I don't want to have to listen to this. I'm going to call, whoever to come and fix it. And I did. I just called Daddy.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
And of course, he would come. He would rescue me.
Yeah.
But we live in a very information-ready world. And a lot of times our fears are unfounded as parents.
I think you're right.
The
yeah.
fear
Some are.
is evidence of our love and our wanting to put a bubble around them.
Yeah, we
It's
don't want
those
them to suffer. I mean, you
experiences,
don't.
right? It's those experiences that they go through that are so important. I remember at Christmas one year, we asked our kids, "What would you like for Christmas?" And they all said, "We don't want anything. We want experiences. We want adventures." So, we planned a ski trip for all 11 of us to go to Colorado and go snow skiing. It was the most wonderful thing we did, and it was right before COVID hit. All of us staying in one condo, something that I never ever dreamed of doing, and it was very expensive, and I know there are a lot of people who can't do that, but take a tent and go camping with them. Get a canoe in the water.
Right.
Do something outside. I think one of the reasons our grandchildren love to come over is because we take them fishing.
Yeah.
We plant the garden. We
Yeah.
let them dig up the carrots. We let them plant the seeds. We paint. We work with clay. We cook together. It's all about relationship and sharing that historical family wisdom that you do have, not what you don't have or what you didn't get. It's about giving them what you got right now.
Yeah. It is interesting. The kids are, especially young kids, I find. I see this in my youngest, and maybe it's because I'm older, I'm paying attention more, but he seems to take an interest more in what I'm willing to show him. And that's really ultimately what I've learned, is that it's my willingness.
Absolutely.
That it matters the most. I mean, I have to say, oh, this might be something. I have to give him the opportunity. Is basically what I'm saying. Like, I love to go foraging and just go walking around and plant identifying, looking through and saying, oh, that's something I don't know what it is, or even if you think it's a weed, don't just get on your knees and get on your belly and look. And so I have a little app on my phone that I like to use to identify them, and I didn't realize how much fun he would have doing that. And so once I showed him that he could do that, he would, when we go to the park, he's like, hey, Dad, I found this. Come see it. Let's look at it, and we'll look it up together and talk about it and see if it's edible. And I realized, wow, he just has an interesting thirst for these things. And if I had never taken that time to say, I'm interested in this, let me just open a little door to him, not forcing anything on him, just give him opportunity.
Absolutely. And most of the time, it doesn't cost anything.
No, you're right.
It's just like, if I have my grandkids over, we're going to cook because we're going to eat. I don't have to go take them to the mall and spend money on them. That time and relationship that we have is more important than anything else.
That's something that I think about a lot, actually. Whenever I was in the 8th grade or the 7th grade, I can't remember which, my mom's dad died, my grandfather. And then not too many years later, my dad's dad died. And so I went, wow, my kids just don't. And then their grandfather my grandfathers were gone, but then my children have lost all of their grandfathers. And I think about that a lot. I'm like, they don't have that experience that I had when I was a kid. But now there's no grandfathers. All the grandmothers are around, but there's just no grandfathers. And I thought that's such a wild thing to really consider, that generations, not just one, and lineages, bloodlines just evaporated, and these children don't get that experience.
Right.
Everything they knew, everything they did, unless some adult was paying attention and willing to share it, is gone. And I know some of that stuff was a lot, not just some. I mean, huge quantities of very useful knowledge was not shared with me. So I think about that a lot. I feel that gravity on me sometimes, like that responsibility. Like, okay, well, I may not know what they know, but I know what I know. And if I don't share what I know, then it's just evaporates too. It just gets snipped off. And I don't want that. I think about that with the boys a lot. You know, like I just want them to have that at least, because they don't have grandfathers to get it from. You know, it's literally just me, and I'm like, boy, they sure didn't get. They didn't get everything that I didn't get everything I needed, and they definitely aren't getting all of that. They're just going to get whatever I can give them. You know,
they'll get what they need.
I just hope that I hope it's enough.
It will be.
You know.
Because, you know, as we age, we begin to collect other people.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And those people add pieces of the puzzle for us.
That's true.
If we're interested.
If we're interested, yes. I like that. That's true.
Yeah. If we're interested, they will.
Well, that's what you're doing here today. I mean, in a way, the show is that for me. I mean, I've thought that a lot of times. I sit with, or sit or talk digitally, however it happens. And I think how lucky I am, because I take away things from every one of these conversations. They shape my thinking. And even if they don't turn the dial a lot, I carry that person's story with me. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's interesting because I find myself going back a lot. Like it's like a book I've read or something, you know, you and all these other people. I'll go, oh, I remember, you know, Mickey said this, you know. It
always scares me when somebody says, I remember when you said, I'm like, oh my goodness, what are they going to say?
Oh my gosh.
Because, you know, we evolve as people, and I surely don't agree with everything I said when I was 18, but.
I don't agree with stuff I said 2 years ago, because, you know, with a show, most of the people I talk to them once, but I'm in every conversation. And what I learned, and I didn't even really think about this until I had somebody brought it up on the show one day, they seem to know an awful lot about me. And I was like, gosh, they sure know a lot about me. And they were like, well, you're on every episode. I've learned about you more than I've learned about your guests, because you're revealing yourself through each person more and more. And I don't know why. It seems obvious. I don't know why that didn't occur to me, that it's a portrait of each guest, but it's also a portrait of me.
Sure.
And that didn't occur to me, you know?
So you're meeting yourself.
Yeah, and so looking back, you know, I look back and listen to a conversation from 2 years ago, and I'm like, wow, just in 2 years, how the guests have shaped me through that process. And I'm allowing myself to change too, you know, because people bring new things. As even today, just new perspectives. It's, you know, as you just stated, you're carrying.
I love that scripture in Revelations that says God is making all things new.
All things new, yeah.
You know, and one of the things that a lot of times we'll talk about in our Circle Up group, which is our support group for people with mental illness, what is God doing in your life now? What's God doing today? Not what are you doing? What's God doing? And it's very difficult for people to stop thinking about what they're doing and start looking beyond themselves as to what's happening in their life, that maybe things they don't control, but that they will have responses to. And part of what we try to do in Circle Up is help people learn how to respond positively to situations, rather than just do what you've always done in your family, and learn personal resources and coping skills, and learn the value of Scripture that teaches us how to face our lives with courage.
Scripture is such a difficult thing for some people, though. I see it affect people in so many different ways. And I've always said, like, how do you read Scripture? And not even just Christian Scripture, but like, you know, holy books or writings from every tradition. And I think, how do you read it? Well, let me back up. How you read it makes a huge difference.
Sure.
Because if you read it historically, that's just informative. But if you read it in an illuminated way, it's so broad. But what does that mean? From person to person, to read Scripture in an illuminated way. I'm always fascinated how one piece of Scripture will speak to the same person in this manifold way, and not even always in a good way. You know, how do you... Something one of our guests talked about, and I think we called them sweet constraints. we'd found the word in Buddhism somewhere. They called it, you have to set sweet constraints when you do anything in that kind of category, because you have to set some rules like, okay, I can't hurt anybody, like harm anybody physically. Like set some rules for yourself as you're reading it, because if you get an indicator, like, because I mean we see this now where scripture's used to like maybe as the foundation for a violent act. How do you stop that from happening? It's like, well, you have to set some like almost moral constraints. But what are they, and who determines it? And it's got to be individual, but how do you convince people that that's important? Such a fascinating topic, though, to me.
It is. And, you know, scripture, when you say scripture, people automatically, a lot of times, I think today, you know, scripture kind of coincides with being Christian, which has all kinds of negative connotations. I don't like to say Christian because it sounds political.
Well, that's new too,
and
right?
I hate that.
Yeah, I get it.
I
know that's true. You're right.
But you know, learning how to read scripture, Old Testament, New Testament, and what? Let's see. Scott Peck wrote this wonderful book, People of the Lie. Let's see. He wrote about, it was the first book that really informed my life as far as how to listen to scripture and how to make it make sense to me. I had it written down, I don't see it right here. But it's about, unless you read scripture and take it through the fire of your own understanding, it has no wisdom in it.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It does make sense.
Because
that
there are
does make
things in the
sense.
Bible. I mean, who's going to have 6 wives now? You know, there are things that are not applicable today.
Right.
There's so much in Scripture that is argumentative. So many views about things that separate people. But if you look at what Jesus said, he said, you know, love God and love your neighbor.
Yeah,
and that's what it all boils down to.
Let that be your constraint.
Right.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Do unto others what you would have them do unto you. You know,
it seems so simple, and that's something
it is simple.
I've, you know, I find myself changing again, and that's okay. And in fact, I was talking to my wife about that this morning. I said, you know, that's something that you have to continue to be okay with, is when you feel a change coming on, at least analyze that. And it had to do with spirituality and religion and all of it, you know. And I told her today, I said, you know, there's seasons, you know, in our lives, and it's okay to watch that season come back around again, but spiritually, sometimes there's a season where I have a thirst to read and consume and share, but then I also and right now I'm going through that season again where I feel a need to just stop for a little while, to not consume and to also not share, and just let everything be really plain and ordinary. And that is good too. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It'll allow me, if I know myself well enough, when the time is right to consume again, it's going to allow me to have experiences that can run back through and re-illuminate scriptures, and I'm rereading.
To process.
Yeah. I'm rereading Walt Whitman right now. It's one of my favorite poets, and I was like, I remember where I was when I closed the book on Leaves of Grass. I was 23 years old. Sitting on a porch swing. It was a beautiful day in Sulphur, and I just sat out there and let it just sit in my brain for an hour after I finished it. Rereading that now, I'm seeing other poems that I didn't care about have meaning, and I'm like, wow, because I hadn't lived enough yet.
Right.
I hadn't had these words. I hadn't lived enough for these to mean anything. I'm so glad to wade back in, you know?
You hadn't had the woundings. You probably hadn't had the exquisite joy. And those two things really inform your life.
Sure. I mean, I thought about that. Like, my first child wasn't even one, and I had no clue divorce was in front of me. Mm-hmm. I had no clue, all these different things that were going to happen. I had no clue that death was in front of me. Mm-hmm. Pain, loss, all those things. Now, there were a lot of joys too, but those were the wounds as you started this conversation. Had no idea what those wounds were coming.
Yeah.
And they changed me. And so they had, without them, they opened my eyes to the words again,
Well, that's what Scott Peck is talking about, and the name of the book is The Road Less Traveled. That those wounds are the fire of our own experience. That's what it means for something to go through the fire of your own experience. Like he talks about faith, that there's no such thing as somebody giving you your faith. You can't have hand-me-down faith because it's not faith. If somebody just tells you what to believe, that's religion. But faith is when you go through 2 hurricanes and lose everything you own and then have to go through an ice storm, living in the woods in a tent, worrying about whether you're going to be able to feed your kids. Does God really love me if I have to go through this?
Right.
That's faith.
Right.
That's when the roots, the tentacles of your very being are reaching for something that is not a thing.
Yeah. The ground. Mm-hmm. The ground of, it's interesting because it gets into some of that, into some Buddhist thought that I've always loved, and it's almost paradoxical, but it's this, the ground you're looking for is groundless.
Right. And
that doesn't make sense in a linear way, but it makes sense when in the language you're speaking in, to where you're going, I'm reaching for something stable, and when I find that stability, I realize it's not, and that is the stability. It's malleable. Yeah, the instability is the stability. It's like impermanence. It's that law of impermanence, that everything that comes together comes apart. Well, that sounds terrifying and puts some people into existential crisis until you realize that actually is the one law driving everything, is that groundless state. And it's a beautiful thing at that point, because without that groundless state, there is no change. We don't get to sit here and these trees that I came out here, all those years ago that were saplings wouldn't be large trees providing shade today without that. I know that's a beautiful thing, and that is comforting, and that's an odd thing. That's a hard thing to get to.
Yeah, it is.
That the groundlessness is the comfort.
And I think the reason it's a hard thing to get to is because we don't want to have to experience that wounding.
It's painful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But once you have, and you have lived through it, there is a resiliency built into your skeletal system.
Yeah, it's like your being is.
Yes,
I
exactly,
get it, yeah.
your being. And then you learn to trust that.
And that's what you talked about at the beginning, like that getting up and going.
Yeah. About 10 years ago, I had breast cancer, and
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and what a remarkable experience. I mean, we go to MD Anderson, and the doctor tells me, you have triple negative breast cancer, and if you live 5 years, we will say you're in remission. And I'm looking at him like, what do you mean if I live 5 years? Wait. That's a brick wall you're not planning on running into. But having gone through so many other things in my life, I wasn't going to listen to somebody tell me that I have a death sentence. That's absurd. I'm a very healthy person with a horrible cancer. That cancer does not define me. It's something I'm going to have to cope with and live with. And, when they started telling me I was going to have 16 chemotherapy treatments and 48 radiation treatments, I'm thinking, no, that's not the cancer I wanted. I want the one where you can take a pill. Well, it didn't turn out that way. But here it's 10 years later, I'm fully healthy, surviving, and because I have gone through so many different woundings in my life, I'm able, I say because I've gone through them. And one other thing that is, I think, extremely important, I have a healthy brain. Brain health is a much, much bigger issue than most people realize. I've never had a head injury. I've never done drugs. I've never had any kind of starvation or lack of oxygen. All those things come together to create your healthy brain. And when you have a healthy brain, the neurotransmitters work, and your choices, your ability to make choices, all of your senses are alive, and so you're fully functional, even when you're really, really sick. It's huge. And I say that because I think a lot of people don't realize how serious it is when a child has a head injury or when they're malnourished. If you have problems with a kid and you can't figure out what's going on, take a look at head injury.
It's so interesting that you're saying this. I got hit by a car, I guess it's going on 5 years now ago. And that was my first fear. Like, I was on the road and somebody hit me about 45 miles an hour. I mean, they hit me. I mean, that's not, it could have been worse than it was, but the way I got hit, I guess it spun me. But there was a lot of blood. But when you get hit by a vehicle, anybody that's ever been hit by one knows your whole body goes into shock, so you don't really know where you've been hit. I knew I'd been hit but it was almost like the only reason I knew is because I saw the blood and I was thrown. So I realized when I tried to move my left arm, I had been hit at some point. I started to realize, I've been hit on my left side, and so I could move my right arm. And the first thing I did, because I saw the blood, and the first thing I did was I went back behind my head and felt, like I'm showing you here, the audience can't see, but I felt, okay, I don't feel anything. And then I looked at my hand, there was no blood, because I was terrified. I thought, I'll take anything but this, like just a cracked open skull, or a brain injury, because I thought my mind, I know, it's like the first thing I did. I thought my mind, I've got to check first, my mind.
Well, I want to put this little plug in. One of the most important people that I have found to use as a resource is Dr. Daniel Amen. And if you're dealing with people with problematic behaviors, Google Dr. Amen, because he has done tremendous research on head injury and brain health, and written books like You Can Be Happier, Healthier, Skinnier, Smarter, Healthier. Just a huge variety of books about how a healthy brain impacts your ability to cope with situations and deal with your life. And as I was saying, I was healthy, I had a healthy brain. I also had a huge support system with my family and my church friends, which not all church friends are going to be healthy. But
but having
again,
a support network
absolutely,
is good, though.
People praying for me and, cheering me on. And so I thank God that I had that experience. Not anything I'd want anybody to have to go through, but I'm healthy now. And my husband and I learned to really enjoy going to the hospital for those treatments, because we'd always see people, and we're people, and we'd check with them, and how are y'all doing? Well, what are y'all dealing with? Everybody's got something.
Right.
Everybody's got something.
You're right. My mother had cancer, and she lived with us when she was going through her treatment, and going up there with her for all of her visits and for her chemo and radiation. When you're the healthy one and you're in these waiting rooms with other people who are waiting on somebody who's sick, and I'm kind of empathic, so it was like, it takes a toll on you to some degree. I remember sitting there for hours and hours and hours, and just my imagination would just run wild with the images, like everybody's story was just running through my mind and my heart, So it was heavier than I realized, just being in there. And I thought how strong the people that are uplifting the patients and the family members are, because they would do a good job. As you said, they would cheer them on, motivate them to come back. I mean, because it's weakening. I mean, my mom there were times when she's like, I just don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to I'm so tired. I'm so miserable. The way I feel on top of the fear, it's just everything.
Is your mom still living?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So she survived it?
She did. Her treatment had a kind of a negative side effect. The radiation where it was at, it actually caused her muscles in her legs to, I don't know the term, but they're not elastic anymore. So like
kind of atrophy?
Yeah, so if she bends her leg and she sits for 30 minutes, they don't flex back out. They have to almost like pull, and it's painful, so she can't really walk. But she's alive. I mean, it's just...
Well, I had some of that, and that's exactly why I've been involved in yoga for 7 years. It has been a tremendous help, not only physically. I think I would be in a wheelchair if I hadn't been.
Yeah.
But also the synergy of being with people breathing together and supporting each other.
You're getting into something so important, and I wish my mom was listening to this, and she might, but it's like that. You talked about choices, and what you're describing is a choice.
You have to go through the pain of it.
Yeah, but you made the choice to do it too. And there are people that just resist resources in certain categories. And everything you just described, I'm going, God, my eyes light up, because I'm going, all of that sounds like the healthy, right thing to do, but I know people will just choose to not do them.
Well, but there is yoga available in Sulphur at Dynamic Dimensions.
Yeah.
You can YouTube it. You can Google it.
Yeah. Well,
you can do it at
it's true.
home. And it's all about finding your center and getting the connection to your breath and being able to send your breath to the different parts of your body. And I know there are a lot of people who have a problem with yoga because it's a Far Eastern practice. I don't really care.
Yeah.
It has worked for me. It's kept me out of a wheelchair. I now have 5 family members that are involved in yoga because they've seen what it's done for me, including my 90-year-old mother. And she has stability and flexibility and balance and can jitterbug all night. She's 90 years old.
And I'm with you. I agree. It's something my wife always says. It's all, as you said, it's choices. I mean, you can put something good in front of somebody and they will choose to not do it. I mean, even like with grief. I mean, there's grief support groups everywhere in every shape or form, but people will choose to not do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know what that is with some people. I mean, I've been like that about some things too, but I don't know what it is. Like, what is the resistance to actually...
I don't think anybody wants to be seen as broken.
I think you're right. That it's a fear. It's
the
like
paradox of it is we are all broken.
Right. Everybody is. And that's what a lot of these things will teach you. If you allow yourself to go forward, you go, oh, I'm not alone.
Right.
But we feel like we're the only ones with the pain.
Anybody who thinks they're not broken in some way is avoiding who they really are. They're probably fearful of getting in touch with themselves. Well, we are not made perfectly. We're not. It's not our perfections and our everything that's okay that connects people. It's our brokenness that connects us.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, smooth things don't lock up together. You know, it's the little edges that fit in. Yeah.
And that, it all goes back to trust. I trust that I can connect with this person in the grocery store who looks like today they might just need somebody to say, hey, how are you?
Yeah.
I mean, I must have a face that says, tell me everything. Because I can stand in the grocery store and I don't care who's standing behind me, they start telling me what's going on.
I'm the same way.
And that's because we're receptors.
Yeah, because it definitely isn't my face, because I'm usually not. I usually walk around with a not so friendly looking face. And but people will walk up to me, and my wife's seen it out of the blue. She's like, "Why in the world did they come to you?" I'm like, "It's just."
Look, I've been in New York with my family. We were on the subway, and there'll be a person with serious mental illness going through a psychotic episode, and they will come and sit right with me.
Yeah.
You know, some of us are just magnets to that, but I think that part of that is kind of a openness to the ministry of availability.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a lot to do with it. I've thought that a lot of times because it's easy. This is where I think sometimes even religion can be dangerous.
Oh, definitely.
Because it makes us think you have occurrences, right? Like that. And then all of a sudden you start getting that little bit of dose of I'm selected, I'm special.
Yeah.
And it's actually... I mean, I'm not going to say I haven't been guilty of having those thoughts. Oh, I've been picked. I've let that go. Now it's like, oh, I'm just open to it. I'm open, so it happens.
Right.
I made a drawbridge, and it's rolled out. So, you know, that's why people keep walking across it, because I put it there.
Exactly. And it has to go back to trust that you don't have a fear of the stranger.
Right.
And a lot of people are fearful of the stranger.
I'm struggling with that right now. I mean, truly. I mean, it'll pass. But I'm going through that. I'm going through like a trust, a broken trust feeling right now. Not in an intimate, personal way, but just...
Things that have happened to you lately.
Yeah, like lately I'm just starting to go... I'm finding myself retreating a little bit into yeah, I believe people are good, but I want them to prove it.
Well,
and I'm just going
there's
through that.
A difference between just blatant, open trust that is naive.
And that's true.
And trust that is with boundaries.
Yeah, like I actually had a conversation just this past week with somebody that has the potential. They have the potential to lose my trust, but they haven't yet. But I know that whatever they do next is going to change the relationship for good or bad. And I was clear, but not rude or anything. But I said, look, I'm just giving you an opportunity to do the right thing. You choose what comes next. But today, everything's okay. But I had to put it out there that way, like it's all good right now. But you do have something to decide, and if, depending on what you decide is going to tell me how you want this relationship to be. And so that's an interesting thing. I mean,
I've worked for 40 something years with people with all kinds of mental health issues. I've only had one person that I reached a place in my life where I said to myself, what's wrong with me that I would continue to allow this person to treat me the way that they're treating me?
Right.
And I finally got to a place where I said, I'm not going to continue a relationship with you. It's not for my health. It's very damaging to me to continue to offer my relationship, my transportation, my concerns, my listening ear to you, for you to treat me the way that I have been treated. And so this relationship is now ended.
Yeah.
I've only done that one time in my whole life.
I've only done that once or twice. I mean, and I have one that's painful even because I actually want a relationship with the person, but I know, and it was the same exact, I mean, I was shaking my head as you were talking about I've been here. Same thing. I was like, I can't let you do this.
Exactly.
I can't let you. Like, I actually would. That's a sad thing.
I did for too long.
Well, me too. And I was like, but the reality is, it not only hurts me, it hurts other people. The way I've described this is like, we're all in a rubber raft. Some people are within your raft, like really that tight survival vehicle. But it is a rubber raft. And when you've got people inside that raft, but one of them is intentionally like stabbing holes in it, it's not just you that's going down in the ocean, you know? And I'm like, I just can't allow you to get in this raft because I'm getting older and I can't tread water like I used to, but there's other people in here with me, you know, too. So you can't stab this anymore.
Well, I think some of us are givers and we have a harder time creating boundaries, and we carry our own pathology that makes us that way. People pleasers, we like people, we feel, you know, love your neighbor is a very real reality.
Yeah.
But there is a time where it's important to be able to say, I can't do this anymore. I care about you, but no, we're not going to do this.
I have someone that I thought was a friend like that. I've had that that was one of the other few times. It was very similar. It was like I tried to extend an olive branch over and above, but I finally said, okay, I have to have a new rule for you because of the particular aggression that you have. You can't control yourself. You're dangerous. And whenever you come within a certain proximity in my life, when you cross a boundary, that danger then puts other people in danger. And so you have a rule now, and that rule is you're a wave. Hi, that's it. Like that's it. I can't talk to you. We can't even be, you know.
You know, I think it's important when we deal with situations like that to ask ourselves, what am I learning?
That's right, yeah.
This particular person died during this past year with COVID. And after I found out that she had died, I had some real not sure feelings.
Yeah.
I felt sorry and yet in relief.
Yeah.
And I realized that what the purpose she had served in my life, not that everybody has to serve a purpose in my life, but that, you know, I always try to look for what was the silver lining of knowing her.
Yeah.
And I realized she taught me to be a forgiver. But then it came to the place where when I put the boundary, I had to forgive myself for letting her take advantage of me for so long. Because it did take it took a toll in my family, with my friends, because I was stretching too far for her.
Yeah.
And I needed to regain my boundaries.
Understand that totally. I totally get that, and that happens to a lot of people. I mean, it's so common to watch. I mean, I've watched that happen with people I care about too that are doing that, and I'm like, you've jeopardized it sometimes. And that's that helped me, believe it or not, watching it happen with other people, which is really sad because you can't help them, but you can still learn from it. And I was like, you're putting other people on the altar of sacrifice for this one person, and this one person isn't learning and isn't changing.
Right.
And you might save them, but maybe it isn't your job to save them. Maybe somebody else might. But are you willing to sacrifice the other people in tow? That was a question I had to ask myself too, and that is a hard question.
Yeah.
When it's right within your intimate
circle.
And
when you have a strong burden of conscience about being human and being a humanitarian and caring about other people, that's a heavy fire
to walk through. It is, because you see, like, you can love and you can care about people, but then when it's right within your own Mother Teresa, as she said, when it's in your Calcutta, and you literally can't make that change there.
Yes.
That's painful.
Persons like that have personality disorders. They have learned behaviors. It's not all chemical imbalance in the brain. They have, as a child growing up, learned behaviors that got them what they wanted. And those behaviors don't work.
Right.
And yet they don't know any other behaviors.
Well, right, because you get out in the world, and if you've been taught that, you get out there and you realize other people aren't going to put up with it. They're just not going to tolerate it, or they don't love you. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. Sometimes I've thought that many times. I'm like, yeah, you're insulated because you're around people that love you, but then you get out in the world, those people don't love you, and they have no reason to tolerate you.
Exactly.
And that is a huge factor. I mean, in their success, actually, in just living, not success financially, but just success in navigating the world of people. I mean,
and there are different types of people who have had personality disorders like that. I mean, some people have actually grown up in very dysfunctional homes where, there was abuse and intolerance and starvation. And as a human being, you don't judge that person.
Right.
You just know that you can't fix them. You can't really even be in relationship with them because they don't know how. And this particular woman ended up in a group home, in just a very sad situation, because even people who are like that have to obey the laws.
You can't hurt people.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I don't know. It's complicated. I mean, sometimes, and this is something that's hard to accept, is sometimes some things are just sad.
They are.
And it's sad that they're just sad, and they're not going to get fixed, not in this lifetime, and that's hard to accept.
Right.
It is. It's hard to swallow that.
And I think there again, you're going back to looking at your own boundaries. You have to realize I'm not God.
Right.
I can't do this. I can't fix this. And I've had to go through that in my life with dealing with people with serious mental illness, that I can't fix these people. And they serve a purpose in life. They have just as much right to live and
their humanity. They're just as a living creature,
yes,
right?
But I need to refocus on what I can do something about. What's the next right thing to do?
Yeah.
And that's a really important question to me. What's the next right thing to do that will be positive, that will improve life on this planet? I mean, it might be, keeping my coffee grounds and putting them in the ground.
Right, but and you're right. I mean, any good action adds to the cumulative good. I really believe that, because sometimes it's easy to look at things globally or cosmically and just see. Well, I'll back up. Like for me, sometimes I look at things globally, I can get a case of the sads.
Oh, definitely.
But when I look at things cosmically, it soothes the sads. Or when I look at things in a macrocosmic way, I feel soothed. But it's like it's that sort of just here on this little dot, that broad scope stuff, that I get a case of the sads.
I've learned not to listen to the news.
News.
I do not even turn on the television all day.
Yeah.
Until late in the evening, we watch the 6 o'clock news, and then we find something else to watch, because you can be so inundated with all the negative things that are going on in the world. And that's why I feel like what you're doing has so much power for the good.
It's so sad, though, because, I mean, that came up in my last episode, or one of the last conversations I had, and it's just, negativity is so addictive, and people crave it. They crave it in a negative way. They realize they need something good, but they'll continue to consume and propagate those negative things through media. And but we're all consuming it more and more and more. So a resource like this is never going to have the traction, because it's just not what's people's appetites.
But if only one person hears this.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's the coffee grounds. It's that
turn
one
off
thing. Yeah.
The TV. Don't listen to what sells. Listen to your still small voice, your inner conscience. Go sit down in the grass and let the DNA of the grass, that is the same DNA as our DNA, God inspired, God created. Connect with that. Lay on the ground and let that energy revitalize you. Those things are so basic. People have stopped anything like that. The idea that, the old hug a tree.
Yeah.
We are living in a world where I feel like God is constantly trying to be an encourager. Look at the spring. I mean, my gosh, it's just unbelievable. But people don't want to talk about that. That doesn't sell anything.
No, it doesn't. Right. I mean, there's this system that is in place, and it's just chugging along. And what's so sad is there are people that are just surviving. I mean, like, and I've been in that situation before too. I mean, I've been one of them where it was like there was just not enough money to make ends meet. Trying to take care of your kids, making choices between food and gas, and so I try to remember that that's very real, and that they're all around us. And those people, it's hard because it's like mission work that goes into an impoverished country and then starts preaching religion before feeding the people.
Exactly.
And I'm like, that's where sometimes I feel like that weighs heavy on my heart, even just where we're sitting. I mean, it's easy to forget because it's so pretty out here right now. We have this luxury to sit here and have this conversation, but I know right now there's somebody stressing out, you know, hoping that somebody's going to leave them good tips today, or that their lights aren't going to get cut off, or that they can make their rent, and they're mentally unhealthy and single, and you know, all that just...
I just have to stop you and say to that person, you know, who's just hoping somebody's going to leave them a tip. As a human being, do what you can, where you are, with what you've got. Tipping is a real big deal to me, because if I have
anything
I can give from my overflow, shame on me if I don't give it.
Yeah, I hear you. I hope that those people, that's the slice of life that I fear for the most, is those in the fissures, like the little cracks, you know.
Yeah, in fragile circumstances.
Yeah. Those are the ones I lay. Those are the ones that keep me awake at night. If anything keeps me awake, it's those people, because I don't. You know, it's like that, and I know that's not on me. I mean, I can only do what I can do, as you said. You know, do what you can with what you have. But they do weigh on my heart. Sure. That particular slice of life. I don't know why particularly those, but they do.
Well, they should, because there's enough for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, we do. We have abundance. We really do. That's the big lie, I think, that I see most of us sort of succumb to, is that there isn't enough. And that's not true. No. It's just that we see a lot of imbalances, but there really actually is. It's how much are we willing to allow things to balance out.
And I believe in a God of abundance. I think, and not like stuff.
No, I understand. Yeah.
But that there's more where everything comes from, and it's a learning experience to learn how to ask for what you need. Go to the resources that are there to ask for help. We have a lot of resources available right now in Lake Charles, and we should, because we've gone through a lot of really difficult times. But again, that's a choice thing of ask for help and do what you can with what you've got. I don't think there's anybody that hasn't gone through hard times. You know, like after the hurricanes, it didn't matter if you were rich or poor. If you didn't have a roof and your house was leaking, we all have faced a lot of the same kind of stuff. And that's not the same thing as the person whose kids are starving. I realize that.
But it is still it's still suffering and still hardship.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard.
Speaking of, I mean, today, I know a lot of people are hoping, because I think the president is in Louisiana today.
In Lake Charles.
Yeah, that's what people are saying, like, if he's coming to Lake Charles, everybody's wanting to make sure he sees, like, the state of things. And I think that gives people a sense of hope, too, just to know that their authorities, you know, that have some ability to move the needle resource-wise, see them.
Right.
That matters to them. It matters that you're seen. I think that matters to everyone. That someone
and
sees and heard. Yeah. Right.
And I'm happy. I know it. I'm helpless.
Hey there, Good News listener. I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I've enjoyed producing it. Now, it's time for the Fishing for Goodies segment, where I turn my interviewer role over to the Good News Fish Bowl. Longtime listeners know that the Fish Bowl contains over 400 unique questions, many seeded by you, the listeners. Did you know that you could submit unique questions to the Fish Bowl? That's right. Just call the Good News Hotline at 802-459-1668 to have your question added. You can also visit findthegood.news and send me an email. Now, let's take that dive into the Fish Bowl. You've listened to the podcast?
Yes.
So you know that I'm going to ask you 3 questions.
Right.
Okay. Well, I drew 3 questions before I got here.
Okay.
And I love these questions. So this is the first one from the Fishing for Goodies segment. What's something that you learned as a child that you believed until you became an adult?
Gosh, that's a hard question. Something I believed as a child. I mean, the first thing I think of is, the Easter Bunny.
Yeah, right.
But of course, I found out about that long before I was an adult.
Before you were an adult.
Well, actually, I was 50 years old when I found out that I had a sister that I didn't know.
Well, there you go.
So there you go.
That's a big one.
It was a big one.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, it was.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you meet your sister?
Yes, we have met.
And is it a good relationship, or?
Well, yes, it's a good relationship.
Okay, yeah.
There are 5 girls in my family. I was adopted by my dad.
Oh, okay.
But I was my mother's child. But my mother had been married before. And it was quite a revelation on my 50th birthday to get a telephone call from this girl who.
So she just called you? Cold call?
Yes.
Or? Oh, wow.
Yeah. But, I like people. So I was just perfectly happy to talk to her. I've learned a lot about my mother's first husband, who was my natural father. And it's been a good experience. He died before I ever knew him.
I see, okay.
So I think that's kind of Pandora's box that didn't get opened, which is fine with me because I grew up in a wonderful home. My dad loved me like his own.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And I was the oldest.
Well, that's well into adulthood to find something like that out.
Yes.
I mean, wow. I actually had a similar experience, but I was a lot younger. I mean, I found out I had a sister.
Mm-hmm.
I was probably 20, 21, a younger sister. So, yeah, I mean, I understand that experience a little bit. It didn't go the same way, obviously.
Well, I remember finding out that my dad, man that I loved dearly, was not my biological father.
Well, how old were you?
I was about 5. I was
when you found out?
Yes.
Oh,
I was at my grandmother's, and her housekeeper knew my natural father. And I said something about Daddy's coming home and we're going to do something. And she said, Billy Rentrop is not your daddy.
She said it like that.
What?
Who said that? Your grandmother said that?
No, her housekeeper.
Oh, her housekeeper said
yes.
that. Okay.
And she picked me up and she sat me on the counter in the kitchen and she explained to me that he was not my daddy. And
wow.
I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I was in shock.
Yeah, so young.
Yes. But, that made me, as a young person, question things.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, just don't
like
take anything for exactly.
Yeah, I've been
what
through that.
Else
what
do
else
I not
do I
know?
believe that I don't?
Yeah,
That's the
exactly.
same thing. I've been through the same experience.
Yeah.
And not that same thing, but I had something happen. It was the same thing, and I was like, what else am I adhering to, or that I just accept blindly? That it made me want to know everything.
Yeah. So along with that, eventually, all 5 of my other siblings found out that Mom had been married before, and they had their own awakening, in regards to that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
But every family has its own, little pieces of the puzzle that.
It's an interesting thing, though. I mean, as you were very young, I mean, in the way that happened, it's just such a.
Right.
I mean,
And the thing was, at 5 years old, my mother didn't really want to talk to me about it. And we really never ever talked about it.
Well, and it was kind of, I hate to say it, it wasn't really the housekeeper's
No,
to say but it did happen the way it happened.
It did, and the thing was, the housekeeper was named Rose. She was an African-American lady that came to work for my mother the day after I was born.
Okay.
And so she was like a second mother.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, so she's been your life.
Yes, absolutely. And I loved her with all my heart. And,
Wow.
miss her today terribly.
That's something.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
So, the story, the book, The Help?
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to rewrite The Help in terms of my relationship with Rose.
Really?
Oh, yes.
So how long was Rose in your life after 5? I mean...
she was in my life from the day after I was born till she died at 80-something years old. And we stayed very, very close. She held me accountable. She cared deeply about our family, and I would go and see her after she could no longer work. I mean, it was just a wonderful relationship. And I think because she was one of those first mothers in my life, I just have always been very open to people of any color. I wouldn't say I don't see color, because who doesn't see color? That's ridiculous.
I don't say that either. That's...
but I loved her, and she loved me.
Yeah, and that's all that mattered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good lesson.
Yeah.
Good experience.
But she told me the worst thing I'd ever heard of.
Yeah, what a shocker.
Yeah.
At that age, I don't even know how I would have processed that. I mean, when you learn things as a child at that age, you don't really have a lot of context. You don't even really know fully what it means.
Right. Right.
Yeah, gosh, I can't even... trying to think of something that I learned at 5 and how, when you go back and try to remember it through your child's mind, sometimes those things bubble up on you later in life. You're like,
sure.
Oh, now I get this. Like all of a sudden something will happen and trigger the memory, and then it frames the whole thing. You're like...
Well, one thing that I've never forgotten, I worked very closely with a psychiatrist in my work with mentally ill, and one day we were talking, and he said, well, tell me about your family. And I told him, and that I never knew my natural father. And he said, well, what kind of relationship did you have? And I said, what do you mean? I've never known him. And he said, but you have a relationship with him. And that was very interesting to think about, because it had always been a zero, null space for me. And when I started thinking about it, I know this sounds very egotistical, but I thought, gosh, he missed out on so much.
I understand that. I do. I mean, well, in a way, it isn't even egotistical. It's just not having a relationship with somebody that you could have had one with. I mean, we all miss out.
But, I did think about that, and then I thought, maybe it's good that I didn't have that relationship. You don't know.
Right.
I'm just so grateful that I had the family that I had.
Yeah. I love that. That's a good answer to that question.
Good.
So in a way, the second question is kind of, I'm curious because it's kind of like the first one, or it maybe leads into what you said a little bit, but it was, tell me about someone that affected your life that doesn't know how much they affected your life.
Well, I've always been pretty verbal, telling people.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Tell them like that they mean something to you. Yeah.
But I think probably Rose would be the person who died.
It's interesting.
Not ever having any idea of the profound effect she had on me throughout my entire life.
Yeah, sounds like it. I mean, that's an interesting thing. That's why I thought that was odd that was the question, because it links right up to the first.
I miss her terribly.
It's like having a second mother, you said.
It was a second mother. And yet she asked me questions about things and pushed me in ways that my own natural mother didn't. And so I had the benefit of kind of like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the story of the red tent. In the Bible you read about in the Old Testament, the women the wives, all the different wives of say one man, had 5 or 6 wives. Well, they would all the wives would go to the red tent when they had their menstrual periods, and they would take all the children with them. And so the red tent was where a lot of female things happened. And maybe one of the little kids might not have a great relationship with their mom, but they had the other moms, and they were kind of like sister wives.
I see, yeah.
But, there was somebody to connect with. Well, Rose was a connector in a different way for me. Just so many different angles and attitudes that were fascinating to me, because she was from a different family, and yet she was as open with me and as transparent with me as anybody could be, and she would challenge me about the way I thought about things. And it was just a marvelous way of growing up with a black mama and a white mama.
Interesting. That is really interesting. I mean, especially considering everything that's kind of going on in our society right now, all the topics that are coming up. I mean, that is a kind of pointed, it's almost pointed directly to that. I mean, how does that inform you as a child,
I remember taking her to the doctor as she got older. She had a black physician, and I would help her go into the doctor's office, and the first couple of times I went, the doctor was like, "Now, who are you?" And Rose would always say, "This is my white daughter."
Interesting. I mean, if she's in your life that long, I don't know that I have anybody that is like that in my life. I mean, now that you say that, I mean, I just don't know that I had anybody that served that kind of role as like a second parent, mentorship. I mean, I had good teachers, but I never had that, it's kind of like Back to the Future is one of my favorite movies, and one of the things that fascinated about me was Marty and Doc, I always want to know, like, how did he become such a part of Marty's life, like he was like as an odd figure. It wasn't his parents. How did he get in this sort of mentor role, and what was their relationship? And I always kind of used to imagine, like, what would that be like to have like an adult mentor, But you had that.
We did, and she was always available because, she worked at my grandmother's house where we lived, and she took care of all of our old relatives. They would go to my grandmother's to stay there, and Rose was their nurse and their nurse keeper. And I learned how to wash clothes on a washboard, how to iron, all those kinds of things. She just wrapped her arms around our family and took care of us, because my grandmother ran a restaurant, and my grandmother and my grandfather were gone all day, and my mother worked at a bank. And so she took care of us.
Very interesting. It is. It's something I don't know, and so I just wonder now, listening to you said that, like, how would that have affected me? I mean, because, if you tend to think, I guess the way I look at parents, and I guess everybody looks at their parents differently, I think my parents struggled a lot, and I wonder if having that extra influence in my life, what would that have done? How would that have shaped me? It's just something to think about and imagine.
If nothing else, it would have given you a variety of perspectives.
Yeah, variety of perspectives earlier.
Yeah,
it's interesting. So this last question kind of relates to some of the things we talked about. We talked about stuff and success, and it's what's an object that you own and treasure that is invaluable to you, but is not valuable to anybody else.
Well, that's a hard question, because I got a lot of good stuff.
Oh.
I like stuff.
Me too. I got a lot of cool things.
I'm an artist, and I'm always creating, and I love other artists' work. So ask me the question again.
So what's an object that you own that's invaluable to you as a treasure, a personal treasure, but has no value to anybody else, no monetary value?
I have a little angel a little rubber plastic angel that was connected to a floral arrangement for my first baby.
Oh.
And that is something along with a photo album that I have, that I put together after he was born. He didn't live, he was stillborn. And I was full-term pregnancy, 9 pounds, 2 ounces. And, after it was all over and I realized how empty I was, what a huge loss it had been. I just had to gather up the pieces and put them together.
Yeah.
But there's a picture. I said the angel, but that kind of opened the dots to connect. I have a picture of him in his casket that my sister-in-law took. And when she gave me the picture, she said, "I am so sorry. I did everything I could to try to get this to be a perfect picture. But when I looked at the picture, there was a ray of light above his head."
Wow.
She said, "I even had the people at the photography place try to take it out." I said, "Deborah, why would you want to take it out? It's his halo. It's his..."
Beautiful.
I mean...
Yeah. So that's your treasure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a treasure in heaven that...
I understand that. I do. That's something that is more valuable than anything.
Mm-hmm. And, stuff is just stuff. I like stuff, but...
The last question that I ask everybody is,
Okay.
did anything good happen today? And it reminds me of what you said about your family having that Monday night, because this question was kind of born out of that for me. I'd get together with my family, and it's so easy to go, "So how was your day?" And then everybody's like, "Oh, had too much homework, and my friend said this, and this is negative, and that's negative," and we end up like stacking up our negative fish stories, and they get bigger and bigger. And I thought, well, what if I just asked the question, did anything good happen today? Let's start with that, and maybe we won't even get to that other stuff. And it worked.
Sure.
My son now, when he gets in the truck after school, he knows it's the first question I'm going to ask. And the other day, I was like, wow, this has changed his thinking. He goes, "Well, I guess not much, but you know what? The janitors are all off work, and so I got to volunteer to take out the trash and bring it to the dumpster at school, so I guess that was something that good happened today." And I said, that was good. And I thought, how funny that's how his brain is wired now. Like,
Yes.
He was like, well, I have to look for something good. And even if nothing else happened, there was that, so that's my good thing. And
See,
I was
you've
like, wow,
rewired
man.
his brain.
Isn't that something?
You really have. That's exactly what Dr. Amen talks about. People have these, what's called ants. Automatic negative thinking.
Automatic negative thinking. I'm guilty. I mean, I've done that.
And you can rewire your brain with gratitude, with identification of things that are not bad, that are good. And when you start doing that, like Ann Voskamp wrote a book called 1,000 Gifts. Have you ever heard of that?
No,
Okay, it's a wonderful book about making you aware of your blessings.
Okay.
You start a list, and
Gratitude
every day
list.
you just keep a number, of the good things. I mean, maybe it'll be your car started and, you didn't have to get it jumped. I mean, it could be anything from the sugar bowl was full of sugar and I had great coffee.
Right.
I mean, anything. But when you when you reprogram your brain to look for the good,
Yeah.
you start finding it.
I like that ant.
Automatic negative thinking.
Yeah, I love that, because I mean that's something to keep. It's something simple that you can keep in your head. Like me right now, I can use that because this dog is barking over here, and we're having this good conversation, and
Yeah.
I could easily. I'm feeling it. Like my attention wants to go.
Yeah.
over there and just be annoyed by it. But it's like, well, you know what? That's an ant in my brain. I've got ants in my brain.
And once you start thinking like that, you start seeing other people with ants in their brain.
Yeah.
But the good news is it can be changed by reprogramming.
That's a really good way to stick the landing on this conversation. But I still got to get your answer to that question. Did anything good happen today?
Gosh, so many good things happen.
It is a nice day.
Oh,
just
absolutely.
That in general. The weather is...
Yes. Just being able to take this time to sit out here in the park is just awesome.
It's a micro vacation for me.
I got up this morning and went to yoga. I love my yoga class. Came home and some cedar trees that needed to be taken out because they've been dead were being taken out. And I was excited because it's clearing out a space for us, but then I was also really sad because I love the trees even though they're dead. But I was able to tell them goodbye.
Oh, you got a
and
piece
have a
right
little
there.
piece of
Yeah.
it, and
Like
then
that.
come and do this. And golly, a lot of good things happen.
Yeah, that's a lot of good things. It's
But
true.
I have to say, there was a little cartoon one time in the newspaper years ago, and this woman says, "Oh, this year our yards are going to be full of flowers all over." And the other woman says, "Well, why are you saying that? How do you know that?" And the lady says, "Because I'm planting them."
Nice. I like that. It's true. It's interesting because you can leave treasures for yourself that way. I think that sometimes when we were talking about objects earlier, and I go in my old shop and there's crates of things that I forget that I've kept. And I kept them for a reason. They're not just junk. I have mementos, and I love going through there, and I'll find a book that I kept, and there's something in there, and I'm like, gosh, I left this for myself. Planted this here so I could find it, and excavate it. Personal archaeology. I love that.
I do too. And my kids laugh at me. They say that I'm the only person they know that can buy their own Christmas presents, take them home and wrap them, put them under the tree, and still be surprised Christmas morning. And it's true, because I live so in the now. I don't carry all that happened last week with me.
It's funny. I had that happen with an author. Well, not really an author. I mean, Thomas Merton is I love Thomas Merton. And I started reading, and this is the strange thing, is I started reading in my mind Thomas Merton probably 7 or 8 years ago. And once I read Seven Story Mountain, I was like, okay, I want more and more and more. And then it just became like my go-to, like that's where I go when I need to read. I end up reading a huge chunk of his library. Well, I was out in my shop probably a month ago doing some cleaning, and I found a box of old books. And in there was a book called Passion for Peace, and I was like, this is Thomas Merton. And I looked at when I bought it, and it had like my bookmarker in there. And I was like, okay, I read this in 1996. How come in 1996, I mean, obviously I read almost all of it, but I didn't finish it. But in my mind, it was like I'd never read Thomas Merton up until 7 years ago, and I thought, I guess I just wasn't ready.
Right.
And so I brought it in the house, and I was like, hey, I have a new Thomas Merton book I get to read, because I need to reread the thing,
This is a book that I have read over and over and over again, and when I read it, I put down the date of when I've read it.
Yeah.
And I guess the first time I started reading it was in 14.
Oh, I like that you do that.
Yeah, and every time I read it, I learn new things from it.
That's
and I
interesting.
Absolutely love it.
I've never seen anybody do that.
Really?
Yeah. I maybe it's common, but I've never seen it. I mean, I've left notes, but I've never done this, like leave the dates by when I made the note in my books. No, I like that.
Well, it has become sort of a guide. It's called In the Sanctuary of Women, and it's written by Jan Richardson about the woman's place in the church.
Oh, okay. And so you've been reading this a while.
A long time.
Yeah.
And, I'm very oppressed with the marginalization of women.
Yeah.
I don't mean I'm oppressed.
No, I understand.
It oppresses my spirit.
Yeah, for sure.
And as an artist, this book has had a way of reinforcing the value of visual art. in the church from me. Is it time to go?
Nope, that was something. I thought it was my wife texting me.
And, I would love for you to come with me one day and see the paintings that are hanging in our worship center that I did.
Yeah, you were telling me about those.
But, it's very scary being an artist. You don't know whether people are going to like what you do or not. But
you're trying to speak something to them through the art, I'm sure, and then you just don't know because it speaks to you. It's coming from you.
Yeah. Well, no, it's really not coming from me. That's the crazy thing.
Okay, I got you.
I'm a vessel.
Yeah, you're allowing it to flow.
And it really does flow. And that I know we need to move on. But, I listened to that podcast about the Holy Mother.
Oh, yeah, the Way of the Rose.
I really want to share at some point some of the paintings that I feel the brush was in my hand, but the picture wasn't. And what we came up with was such a feminine realization
really
of God.
You said that episode really spoke to you. I know we were going to get together and talk about that because that.
And I'm not Catholic,
but that's still the. But neither are they. They wrote that book, so.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is.
But, the world is starved for mothers. And this is Mother's Day weekend. And the Holy Mother, to me, is the female part of God that a patriarchal world doesn't want to hear about.
Well, right. I mean, it takes that. Then you're getting into like power and control.
Oh,
and that
absolutely.
And retaining power.
Yeah.
And authority.
Yeah.
That kind of
that's
stuff.
a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't even know where. But anyway, this book has helped give me a sense of authority about the work that I do. When you asked me to be on the podcast, I thought, why would he want me to do that? I've never written a book. I don't have anything of real value to add. My paintings are not known by anyone. I just am a little seed. But things that have happened in my life, I think there have been extraordinary things that have happened. And I love telling people about them because I feel like that is God and the feminine part of God.
Well, that's
I connect
something.
with.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've never had that thought. Maybe as a child when I was in church, only because that was the language that we used. That God was a he on a throne, a man, a person, like a. I don't even know what. Like almost like, I mean, I hate to use this. It sounds like I'm being in jest, but almost like a wizard type. King type.
A man with the magic wand.
Yeah, and that just pretty early on in my youth that just dissolved. I mean, and it was really after I had what I would call an experience with something mysterious that I began to identify as God, that identity, that shell that I kind of was sold or taught, whatever, exposed to, began to just fall apart. And once that began to fall apart, the male and female just kind of became just in a dance together within that.
When you use the term dance, are you familiar with Richard Rohr?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Richard. Yeah. I tell you, the most influential work that I read was that book he put out called The Universal Christ. That is such a good book. I mean, he has a really good podcast.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He's changed my life in a lot of ways. I felt such a community when I started reading his work that I wasn't the only one who thought like that.
Yeah.
And I think he is revolutionizing theology for our time.
I agree. I think he's brought Christian mysticism out of the archives, and then that's where someone like Merton for me is in the territory too. He's in, this sort of the term that Merton tends to use a lot and other people would say is sacred ordinary, that
Right.
it's very plain.
Right.
It is not separate from your ordinary life.
Uh-huh.
And that's something I like because that appeals to me because I'm not a Sunday saint,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a saint at all. I think that it's just the ordinary world and the ordinary everyday life.
You realize that ordination comes from ordinary.
Yeah, right. That's right. I mean, if we start I've always... It stings me when we separate.
Mm-hmm.
When we say that this is more precious
Mm-hmm.
because it's set aside or made of something different or it looks different, than this thing
That's one of the tenets of Methodism that I hold to is the priesthood of all believers. We are ordinary, and so are those who are ordained. I mean, look at the Catholic Church. And I don't want to get into all that.
I understand,
but
yeah. I do understand because, I feel the same way. I understand the value, or at least I accept the value of ritual and from any tradition, where it comes from and how it is used to point us towards something sacred and to help us identify with the sacred, especially when we aren't feeling too sacred.
Right.
When we're struggling, I've felt like ritual helps. Not just Catholic ritual, but anything that you can touch again.
Yeah.
A formula.
Even if it's standing in the window at your sink, washing dishes.
That's right.
Looking out.
But if it once that becomes elevated over, then I feel like we move into a dangerous territory that can become toxic very easily, and then we get into power structures. Who is important and who isn't.
We went to Greece and Italy, and going to the Vatican was one of the worst things I've ever done.
Really?
Yeah. I just...
Well, it probably looks like a kingdom, huh? Like a...
Well, the wealth.
Oh. Yeah.
I appreciate the goodness of the Catholic Church. I have just so much confusion about why it became... Why the Vatican became what it is. And all of the...
That's just, really in a nutshell, this is probably the oversimplified answer that I would give, is that it's like I think we're seeing that in America right now. Not with Catholicism, but with Christianity is going through that, I think. We're seeing the powerful see the benefit of adopting religion, wrapping itself. Government power wrapping itself in religion. And then that becomes an approved form. And once those two things get blended together, we have a problem. And that's exactly what happens with Catholicism. You see a persecuted Christianity begin to take hold of Rome as a cult and spread, and then you see a Roman emperor politics realize that, okay, if I want to keep this structure in place, I want to keep control, I just adopt this, make this the religion, outlaw others, and then you have Roman Catholicism. It's really just one of we've seen it over and again, and it'll continue to happen as long as humans want power and control. And it's really kind of a disgusting thing.
Oh, it is. It's not at all what God intended.
It's pretty icky.
Yeah. Well,
and what's bad is it builds these lasting infrastructures that get rooted in so much. But what's really wild is you still see good things come out of them eventually. It's like, then you look at individually, like St. Francis and St. Therese and Teresa of Avila. And you go
all
through
the mystics.
Yeah, the mystics, and you're like, okay, when you start to read the mystic works, and most of them, really, it's the sad truth, most of them were considered heretics at one time or another until it can be appropriated properly.
Right.
Then it gets the seal. That kind of stuff is, I don't know what to even do about that. That's why I'm trying my best to stay wild.
I love that.
I really am.
I respect that about you because
just untrimmed and just let it go. It's hard though.
It is.
Because when you get into a conversation about religion, sometimes this is what I've experienced. People are going to talk to you in their religious lexicon. And I think about it kind of like on like sci-fi shows. You know, somebody's usually wearing a translator. And you'll see an alien over there going, you don't but you'll hear like English come out, and then when they speak back and forth, they're able to communicate. I try to take that approach. Because when someone comes to me and they are a Southern Baptist, but we've agreed to sit and talk. I'm not Southern Baptist. I am not going to speak Southern Baptist. It's not where I come from, but I know enough about it. I've lived a little bit of it to where when they begin to use that, I can go, okay, all this is just a little bit of language. We're probably talking about the same thing, but they're using he, him, you know, it's okay. I just let it go and go, you know, I let it go. And I've had even people message me on this show, like, they're like, I don't know how you know, that was uncomfortable because I don't agree with what they were saying. I'm like, well, but you're missing the point of the conversation. Then it'd be very easy for me to point at whoever I was talking to and say, yeah, they need to change the way they talk. That might not be the case at all. You know, I advocate maybe you need to learn what they're talking about so when they talk, you understand it. Because they're still reaching like a culture of people. They are still trying to do a good thing. They're just not quite speaking your language.
It's just like reading the Bible.
Yeah, it's like you have to like make those mental flips, you know, and that's okay. I don't see that as a bad thing, but there are people that just can't get over the language part. I mean, I talk to them all the time. Yeah. And they're like, I just can't listen to that because it's just not my language. I'm like, I get it. You know, I totally get it. I understand because you're trying to you're doing something else. You're in a different world. It's, for instance, like one of the things that fascinated me many years ago was this documentary someone made. They were in Dharamsala, and they were interviewing some Tibetan lamas, and they were asking them about Jesus. And first of all, their position, they were so friendly and so laughing and smiling the whole time. I was like, their attitude is so good. They're not, they weren't really worried about theology or anything, but the interviewer was like, so what do you think about Jesus? And I laughed because he was like, well, I actually know very little about Jesus, but I do know that that's who Christians worship, and I know these things. And it was like just the cliff notes. And he's like, from my perspective, Jesus would be a great bodhisattva, you know, and he was starting to frame Jesus through his own understanding. And I was like, yeah, so see, but for him, it wasn't heavy. He didn't feel like he was doing anything wrong.
Right.
He didn't feel like he was going to offend. He was like, well, you asked me a question, and I'm just framing it through my own understanding, my own life, my own culture. And I was like, that should be how we all are. Right. That should be okay. That should not be worth fighting over. This guy just gave me an honest answer. I gave the interviewer an honest answer, and I responded to it. And that ought to be okay. But we don't live in that world. I mean, it's a fist fighting. Kind of drives me batty, actually. That's something that's I don't know why I care about that, but I've cared about that for a long time. Like that particular thing. I want people to learn how to have religious conversations without losing it or feeling like they need to
be right,
convince that other person of their correctness or their incorrectness. You know, I watch a lot of debates, and it blows my mind how that becomes where they almost all seem to devolve into this arm wrestling match. Yeah. And I don't know, I think there's a lot of pain there that if we could just get over that one poison, it would just free us all up to get along a lot better. Politics is like that too.
That's exactly.
It's the same type of fight. Yeah. How can I convince you?
Because in that kind of situation, somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. Nobody's listening.
Yeah, because
we could talk about that.
If you lose, you're wrong. That means what you believe is wrong, and if what you believe is wrong, what else
then
do
you're
you
wrong.
believe? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an ego. Sometimes it's a huge ego component too.
Often. Yeah.
You know, I like saying I don't know.
I have gotten to the place where here lately I say I'm so open-minded, my brains are falling out.
I'm more thankful every moment that I found.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Mickey. To learn more about resource management services, please visit the links in the show notes. If you found something of use in this conversation, consider visiting findthegood.news/donate, where you can help me continue this good news mission from the Louisiana Gulf Coast. I thank you for going on this road trip with me and for seeking out good news.